Welcome to the Believe Again podcast, brought to you by Visit Planner. I am your host, Josh Robery, and my goal with this podcast is to help pastors and ministry leaders find momentum through practical advice and inspiring stories. I've had the opportunity to work with hundreds of pastors through my role at the Association of Related Churches, helping them start new churches across the country. And I want to bring that experience to you in a helpful and practical way with this podcast. This season, we're focusing on something I'm really excited about, and that is Relaunch Sunday. And so each of our guests are bringing a perspective to help you relaunch Sundays at your church. And today, I'm very excited that we get to speak with Kevin Daughtry from Yellow Box as we jump into the topic of rebranding, logos, and all that goes into the creative side of a church. He has been a huge resource to me. Yellow Box has actually created our website, our brand, our logo, helped us with our colors, all of that amazing stuff. So if you're interested in that side of things, marketing, branding, you're going to get real excited about the things he has to say. So let's jump right into it. Well, it's just after Easter. Kevin, I know you have had a busy couple of weeks. How are you doing right now?
Oh, man. Well, if I had any natural hair on my head left, it would have fallen out by now, probably. We made it, and we know we had a lot of Easter is usually a busy season for creative agencies that work with churches, but it definitely was busy this year. And but yeah, it was a good season. We got a lot of cool projects out and ready for the spring. Ready for the spring.
Well, I'm happy to talk to you today about brand and rebranding as we're targeting relaunches and revitalization of churches today. But you know, I think one of the other reasons why I am excited to talk to you is because we wouldn't have a Believe Again podcast without you and Yellow Box. And so I'm just real thrilled to have you on as someone who just really encouraged me to do this, who created our brand for us and created our website for us. So thank you for doing that. You're kind of like the dad of the Believe Again podcast.
Oh my gosh, man! No, we're honored to be a small part of it, and grateful to see the work you're doing with, you know, all these great conversations that people need to hear. I think that it's a lonely world to be a planter. Sometimes it's a lonely world to be an entrepreneur of anything, and really, you know, you're as a church planter, you are an entrepreneur. You're the head of a founder. You're creating something that didn't exist. And even though they have great organizations like ARC to help walk alongside them, and coaches like you to help walk them through those journeys, it can still be a lonely process. And so kudos to you for launching something to assist and encourage and equip that community.
Yeah, it's something I wish I would have started a long, long time ago that I've always wanted to do, but I was just afraid, hey, what are people going to think about me? They think that I'm know-it-all or for starting a podcast. And I felt like I started at a good time, but I wish I'd have started earlier. And you were a big encourager in that. And I remember when you came up and talked to me, and if I could have picked one person to design my stuff, it would have been Yellow Box, one organization. I mean, that's who I wanted to design my stuff. I just never knew to ask. And you're like, why didn't you ask me? I would have done this for you. And I was like, well, if you're up for it, you're who I want to do it. So thank you. And I know you're a great resource for people. So, well, let's jump in a little bit. So you guys have been helping churches for quite a while now. How did you get started helping churches?
Yeah, well, you know, actually we started Yellow Box in 2013, but I was in vocational ministry for 20 years, you know, give and take, as a youth pastor, as a young adult pastor, as a worship pastor, as a creative pastor, as a family pastor, associate pastor. And I was on my way to plant a church actually through ARC. Back when Corey Hardesty was the church plant director. And so he was my youth pastor growing up at the church I grew up in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And
oh, really? Okay. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. Well, Steve Blair is the reason I'm a believer, because of his patience and his encouragement. He was the, one of the associate pastors at the church I grew up in with Corey. And
so everyone on my mom's side of the family graduated from Southern Miss.
Yeah. And that was for Hattiesburg, Mississippi, go Eagles.
Yeah.
I reconnected with Corey. I was actually on staff at a church in Fort Worth, and was going through a transition and was kind of discouraged. And, my wife and I had Fridays off. And so we went out to go grab dinner and ran into and do a little shopping and ran into Corey at a Nordstrom rack. And I was like, he didn't look like he had aged a day. Because we were, I mean, we were at Highlands on day one in 2001 because all our friends were there and involved in it. And so that was my DNA spiritually, but I hadn't stayed connected with him as well. And so, he was like, dude, what are you doing? Let's connect and let's go grab lunch. So ended up inadvertently having lunch with the ARC team that they had just finished a conference at Gateway. And so,
Oh, wow. Yeah. That was right before I got here.
he, encouraged me, spoke into me and was like, man, what are you doing? Like, what do you want to do? And so it kind of encouraged me to chase the dream of launching. But in that, so we moved down to Houston. We're part of a church launch down here to kind of help transition into launching ourselves, and realized that in that process, I was more excited about helping other people create and launch things than I was about launching my own church. Also, I heard the sound of my voice on a recording and realized that people would have to listen to that grinding sound for like 51 or 52 weeks a year and might not be the best for their mental health. But I was always,
I think that same thing about my voice. And so I started a podcast.
But I remember, I was always freelancing in the creative realm. When you're especially when you're like startup, ministry launch mode, like you have to kind of wear a few hats to make ends meet. We have 3 kids, got to do something. And so, but what happened was I turned that into a passion and realized, I'm more excited about helping other people bring their dreams to life. And so spoke with ARC about, that what I want to do there, and met with Jeff Wells, that guy, and some of the team there. And we're like, hey, well, we'll become
Which
partners.
Jeff gets repeatedly mentioned on this podcast.
He's like the, he's the connector, man. He really is. He just has a heart for people and really cares about people. And so we, set out to create what would become Yellow Box, and started helping. Obviously, because of my connections and relationships, churches were a big part of that journey, and they still are. We've helped launch hundreds of churches across the nation at this point. And then also now get to serve nonprofits and businesses and stuff like that. But really for us, churches are still a big part of what we do.
Amazing. Well, I brought you on here because, I wanted an expert on branding, and more specifically branding design. I work with pastors on branding all the time, but it's more on the words that are used to describe a brand, and you help with that as well. But I wanted to bring someone that had some strengths in there that I don't necessarily have. And so here you are. Why don't you tell us a little bit about, like, what are some of the misnomers that people have about branding, and what is branding actually?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, especially in, church launch world or startup world, you're really working with a tight budget. And a lot of times people are working with maybe an unexperienced view of what a brand looks like, right? Because of their experiences, it might not have been a healthy one, a healthy approach to branding. And so a lot of times we have to educate the difference between, hey, I just need a logo. Well, actually, that's not what you need. What you need is a brand. You need a full visual identity. And so we kind of start there, asking them kind of their experience and understanding about branding. But really for us, the best way we've kind of learned to say it is, in the South, we put these like doormats outside of our homes. They're like kind of goofy and catchy, and they want to catch attention, and they're welcoming, and they say something that makes people laugh, or it's a common trend, especially here in Houston area. And so the analogy we've come up with for what a brand, the difference between a brand and a logo, is obviously a logo is a part of a brand. But if you think about it this way, a lot of churches, all they have is a logo. And that's kind of like just having a doormat. So you have a doormat, it catches your attention, it makes you feel welcome, maybe, maybe sometimes not.
Yeah.
But then you open the door and there's nothing going on the inside of the house. It's a blank slate, like it's just slab. And there's no, culture, no DNA, no paint on the walls, nothing. And so really a visual identity, a full brand package consists of obviously a logo and an icon. So a word mark and an icon, typically, sometimes just a word mark in a series of icons. A color palette that's really, catered to the unique DNA of that organization and their audience. Typography pairings for primary, secondary, typefaces and body copy, and design elements that, that could be illustrations, it could be patterns, it could be textures, it could be how you mask images, how you use, different content in your design. And then, of course, all of that coming together in a cohesive front that's custom made to fit not just the DNA of the leadership, right? Like we ask questions to help discover, pastoral flavor and taste and leadership flavor and taste, but then we also do demographic studies to understand the audience that they're planting to. Um, and sometimes we have to build a bridge between, the leadership's preference and the audience's preference and help them walk through that. Because what if the leadership has an outdated preference and the audience they're planting to is a lot of young families? We have to help navigate that and walk them through. And the word we use for that, or the phrase we use for that, is providence over preference, right? Like, what does it mean to lean into the will of God instead of my own preference in something? And that's not, it's not uncommon, but it doesn't happen as often as it used to, that someone's taste is way out of touch with their audience. But those are the things to consider: is who are we making this logo for? Who are we making this brand for? Who are we creating this visual identity for? Because if we just create it to one person's unique taste and don't do the research and understand who it's really made for on the back end, then we've failed to really deliver something that's going to be functional and long lasting.
Yeah, that's such a great point. I think it's hard for leaders who want to be in control. All this is coming from them. This is their deal. This is
Yeah.
they're laying their life down. They're the ones that got to live with it. To kind of like detach their design preference from something. And there's a couple things that I think about with that. Is one is like, everyone I know that has good taste gets input from other people on their outfits. They're searching online, they're looking online, they're a student of gathering information on good taste. They don't trust their own taste,
Yeah.
in a sense, and they do, but it's amassing from other people. And I think with every church planter that I've had the chance to work with, what I want to get them to understand is like, hey, you understand this, but do they understand what you want them to understand about this? And that's why sometimes your name has to change, your slogan has to change, the way that you state things. It can be the same vision, but the way that you say it needs to change. And when you guys designed the Believe Again branding package, all those elements you mentioned, the colors, the fonts, the icons, the typography, the patterns, all that, you did that for me, and you sent it to me, and you sent me two options, and there was one that stood out for me right away
Yeah.
that I was very excited about. But when I showed it to other people, almost everyone was excited about the other one.
Yeah.
And I showed it to uh, women that I think have good taste, which my wife being one of them, and her good friend Courtney, who has great taste, has helped us pick out colors in our house and things like that. And both of them like the other one. And I thought, well, man, do I just have bad taste, or is this just a preference thing? And so what I did was I'm in for a compliment for those leaders who like something, but you don't actually end up using it. I sent it to a bunch of design people. What you sent me.
Yeah.
And I said, which one do you like, creatives? And every creative chose the one that I like.
Yeah.
And so I had a decision to make. I said, hey, do I want to choose the one that I like and that who I consider people that are smart, like, or do I want to choose a logo that's going to connect with women, that's going to connect with the audience that I want
Yeah.
to get? And I chose that one. So the one that I use is not even my favorite design that you guys have done for me. And I'm hoping maybe one day we'll do a rebrand and go back to the other one. But yeah, it's about who do you want to reach, not which one you like the most.
Yeah. I think it's a hard thing to come to terms with sometimes, understanding that journey, that we're not, creating for a personal brand. And in your case, it is more so a personal brand because it's, not a church, but it is an organization that helps churches. So it reaches further than your personal identity. But I do think the practice of bringing other people in for input and understanding who your audience is, and when we create a brand, we're looking at long-term trends. We're not looking at short-term trends. We're looking at modern design standards. And we don't necessarily recruit creatives. There's about 26 of us on our team. We don't necessarily recruit creatives just because their background is church. We recruit people because they have experience in healthy, formal design processes. They've gone to school for this, they've been trained in this, and that means that they know how to take the difference between creating something that they personally like and something that's really going to work for the client, and something that's really going to work for the church. And that means you have to put, as designers, they have to put their personal taste on the shelf every day and go, okay, I want to make this excellent. I want to make it modern. It's got to stick to these parameters, but they're not creating for themselves. They're creating for other people. And so we say, we make things personal. We don't take it personal. And as a creative, as an agency that services a variety of clients and flavors, because we work with Southern Baptist, we work with non-denominational, we work with Pentecostal, Methodist, Presbyterian, across the board. We're serving, churches all across the United States in different regions even. So if we have an ARC launch in Boston versus an ARC launch in Austin, right? Like there's going to be a big difference in who the audience is and their familiarity and even their comfortableness, like their level of comfort with the church itself. And a lot of these kind of de-churched cities or communities that they're not part of the Bible Belt, there's been a lot of trust lost with the church. And so part of our job is how do we help, and usually it has nothing to do with the church itself that's planting. And so that's something we have to contend with, is how do we also help, how do we build a brand? How do we help launch a church in a way that helps them earn trust in the community that they love?
Yeah, and that's why I think branding is so important, because you have a brand whether you want one or not.
Yeah.
And so it's what do you want people to think about when they think about you? And if you're not intentional about that, then you have lost control over something you can easily influence and help people take a step of faith. And so I always think of it, because I have friends and even from my background, people like, hey, I can't believe that you send mailers out to tell people to come to church. I can't believe you spend money on a website, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, let me ask you this. Like, if you were to start a church, would you put a sign outside?
Yeah.
You would. Why? Because you want them to know where to go, right?
Right.
Okay. So would you put letters on that sign? Yeah. Well, what letters would you choose?
Right.
What size? Would you choose small font? Oh, you choose big font. So you made a branding decision right there.
Yeah.
Okay. Why did you do that? What color would you put on that sign? You wouldn't put a black on a black sign. You would variation of the color there between the letter and sign. Okay. You made another branding choice there. So we're saying, let's just be smart about it. Okay. Well,
Exactly.
give us some, why don't you give us some like fundamental principles? Hey, this is a bad design and this is a good design.
Yeah. Well, there are definitely universal truths to bad design and good design. And there's an ocean of subjectivity in between those, right? And so good design obviously is clear, it's not confusing, and it fits to the audience, right? It's something that attracts, it works, right? That's one of the ways with good design. Obviously there's things that are universal, like allowing space to breathe on a design, allowing intentionality with the formatting of the layout, right? You're not just throwing stuff up there and it looks like graffiti unless you intentionally want it to look like graffiti. And then that's a different process, right? Like there's universal truths to design. But the reality is what we've had to learn how to do over the years, because we've worked with clients that have a lot of experience in this and clients that are completely oblivious to this. I'll tell you this. I remember working with one client, good friend of ours, worked with him for years, and had a struggle. And we're trying to figure out, man, why is this not connecting? And he had gone through, I think, 4 creative directors in 2 years. And so moved from out of state to be a part of his church. And we were working with those, and then they would leave in 6 months and then another person would come in. And so we'd connect with them and that would be our interface. And so finally something wasn't connecting. I was like, hey, let's go out and lunch. So we sit down and we're talking at lunch, and I pull out the concept that we're trying to get approved. And the newest creative director had just left. So we're working directly with the lead pastor again. And I'm like, you said you wanted this to be more bold, right? It's like if you want to make a cuss word statement that's not a cuss word to a designer, say, make it pop. That's
Can you make it pop? I'm not going to give you anything about what I think that means. I just want it to pop. Yeah. I'll know it when I see it.
I know it when I see it. And our answer to that is you'll see it when you clearly communicate it, right? And so I sat with him and we were talking, and he said, I think this needs to be more bold. And this thing, man, it was teal. It was like a bright teal and a bright orange. Like this thing was popping. And he was like, I need it to be more bold, more colorful. And I'm like, And so I pull it up. I'm like, what colors do you not like these colors? Like you say, make it pop. What do you want it to be bolder and brighter? Is it just the colors you don't like? Is there something else about it? So I'm trying to ask those details. And he goes, it's in that moment when he goes, oh, I'm colorblind. And it was like, you remember the movie The Sixth Sense, where Bruce Willis's character realizes that he's been dead this whole time?
Yeah.
It was like that. Like I was Bruce Willis and I'm seeing like the doorknobs and like everything's coming, and it's like this flashback. Like I literally had like a series of moments go through my mind of all the times where something didn't work and we're trying to get to the bottom of it. And I realized, and so I just looked at him and said, man, you have a physical disability. Like you're physically disabled. I said, I know you go play golf a lot. What color is the grass when you go play golf? And he goes, it's orange. And I was like,
Oh my
his cones were
gosh.
switched, his cones in his eyes. And so I just said, what you need to do to preserve the creative process at your church is you need to give a big idea. Like, here's my vision. We're going to do a series on Jonah. I want it to be like old school nautical. I want to see some old school waves, but nothing like too cheesy, something real cool and classic and old world vibes. And then you need to give that over to someone and let them own it and delegate that because you have a physical disability. But what that also made us do is to go back and look at our process and go, how do we improve our discovery on even a project like a series design? So not even a brand, just like a series design for a church series. Like, how do we go in and improve our process so that we can extract the things we need to do to hit the nail on the head, even if the client is colorblind, And
Yeah.
so that was a journey. So I think that's how we've tried to work with the reality of subjectivity and creative. And we've also created a process we call the design persona. It's kind of like a personality test, but for design tastes. And so we walk our clients through that process, and they basically fill out this survey, and it helps us understand. We communicate universal truths of design in that process. Here's what bold looks like. Here's what classic looks like. This isn't our interpretation of these things. This is industry standard definitions of these things. Like if you're in art school and someone says, what is classic design? This is what they're going to pull up. And so we're walking through that process with our clients in a way that they can understand it, because they might not know design language. And then we have them fill out the survey, and it helps us identify the likelihood of them wanting that approach in their creative. And so it gives us an element, and also gives us kind of a Rosetta Stone. When we say bold, here's the universal truth for bold. When we say retro, here's universal for retro. When we say Memphis design, which is like a kind of this busy graffiti 90s look, here's what that is. And so now we're putting common language to a subjectivity of design.
As a pastor who is like focused 100% on people preaching the gospel, you're not aware of those trends taking place. You need a designer to come in, and you got to give some trust. And that's where you guys come in. You do a good job of that. Well, one of the things you mentioned, is the last thing I wanted to touch on, is the fact that, hey, it's fun to start someone fresh with a brand that is a church planner that you're working with and you're dreaming up. But the process of like when you do have to redo it, like what are some things you learned about rebranding that you feel could be helpful?
Sure. Usually, I mean, if a brand is done right, so let's say that a brand was done professionally and it was done well, we've done brand evolutions for organizations. So brand evolution is basically where there's been some changes in the DNA of the church over time. They started off this way, and now they focus on these things. They focus more on community and outreach and stuff like that, which wasn't as prevalent. And so they're realizing they have some shortfalls in their communication, in their design, and their brand styles. And so in that case, we usually come alongside them and help evolve the brand to the level it needs to be to keep up with where they've evolved as an organization. But if you do the brand right, you don't have to flip the table on it later. You know what I'm saying? You might add some other design elements. You might need to add some sub branding for kids and outreach programs. You might need to evolve the color palette. There was a trend about 5-6 years ago where all these churches went black and white with their brand. Their only colors were black and white. And then they offset everything else with just the use of photos, which might sound like a really clean way to do things. And it was a trend for a while. But what a lot of these organizations figured out is that by doing that, not giving anybody on their team their design options and a toolkit to play with, those contractors or staff members or whoever was working on their creative was breaking the brand every step of the way just to make it relevant. because all they had was such a simple palette that it was not usable. You know what I'm saying? All you have is black and white and a logo, and I have nothing else. And so what you end up doing is,
That is so true. That was, I mean, so many people went that way.
yeah. And they end up, their social media looks different from their website, which looks different from their signage, which looks different from their print collateral, which looks different from the mailer. So it's like there's this breaking process of consistency. And the reason consistency matters is because you and I both know the value of repetitive marketing, right? Like, so if I'm going to do a saturation mailer to 80,000 homes, I'm also going to want to target those neighborhoods with digital ads that match that mailer in language and design. And then also, a physical piece, an invite that I put in their hands physically. Also, the more touch points you have, the better your likelihood of retention is and impact is. And so, but if we do that the wrong way, let's say we spend a bunch of money on a mailer and they show up, or they go to the website and it doesn't look anything like what they got in the mail. And then they show up on site and it's, disconnected. I'm in the wrong place. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's this loss of trust that happens, and it's not because anybody's, done anything wrong from a, lifestyle perspective. It's just a disconnect in the communications.
Well, you shared some great principles with us today. I'm very happy to have you on the podcast and grateful for you carving out some time today.
Yeah, man.
Why don't you tell us a little more how people can stay connected with you and Yellow Box and some of the things that you guys do for organizations?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can visit our website at yellowbox.co, yellowbox.co. We're on Instagram at Hello Yellowbox. We're on LinkedIn and Facebook too. So find us there. But we get to work with churches of all shapes and sizes, whether you're going through the launch phase yourself, or you're coming through and relaunching, or you're realizing that you kind of hit a roadblock in your visual identity and your creative. We also come alongside churches as their virtual creative team. So a lot of times our first season with a church is helping them get launched. So standing up their brand identity for their main organization, helping them put the fundraiser collateral together so they can go have, pitch conversations with funders. And then helping them get all of their collateral ready for launch day, helping them do a kids brand to help them build their kids environments. And obviously doing their website, a story video. There's all kinds of elements that we package depending on what they need. But the other side of our story is we also come alongside them as a virtual creative team after launch and help them with recurring creative design needs, and recurring video needs, helping them with website updates and processes like that. And we don't have a one size fits all package because no two churches are alike. And so every organization has different strengths and different weaknesses. And sometimes those strengths and weaknesses change in real time over the course of months or years. And we stretch and flow to fit that unique need of that church, or nonprofit or business. But we definitely have a system that we know works well for churches. We also have resources and articles and stuff on our website, and a design market where you can go and buy designs that were unclaimed or unused, and adapt them to your needs.
Awesome. That's a good idea with the unclaimed market.
Unclaimed freight. No, just kidding.
Yeah. I used to, I remember one time I looked up some unclaimed money in my name and from the state. I got a little check in the mail from a power bill from when I moved.
Oh.
They never sent me the overage. Got a nice little $17.32 check to go
Chick-fil-A.
Yeah, go walk around the mall with a little change in my pocket. Well, thank you for being on the show today, and I hope you get some rest after some long nights preparing for Easter.
Maybe my hair will grow back next time.
Maybe so. Talk to you later.
Much love, my friend.
Again, I want to thank my guest, Kevin, for joining us today. I know if you reach out to Yellow Box, you're going to find a resource that can help you no matter where you are in your pastoring journey. They can help from launch phase projects like initial branding and fundraising collateral to recurring creative needs and even startup or business clients. So give them a shout out and reach out and connect with them at yellowbox.co. Before we wrap up today, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Visit Planner. We couldn't have this season without them, and they are a perfect fit for what we're trying to do because I have never seen a tool work so well to help people find momentum like Visit Planner. So if you're looking to increase the number of first-time visitors at your church through utilizing digital strategic ads to find people who are looking for a church and help them plan a visit, Visit Planner is a tool for you. Make sure to reach out to them at Visit Planner to schedule a free demo and find out more about how they can help you. As always, I want to thank you for tuning in to the Believe Again podcast. I'm so glad you decided to join us today, and I can't wait for you to be with us next time. Until then, keep believing and leading strong.